Port Charles had seen its share of contested legacies, but the storm that gathered over the Quartermain estate was different, quieter at first, more intimate, the kind of pressure that builds behind smiles and cocktail toasts until a single hairline crack becomes a fracture and then a clean break. It began with Monica's phrasing, a deceptively tender line in a meticulously drafted testament, "My dearest sister." Those 3 words rippled outward through a family trained to hear subtext, to parse the difference between affection and assignment, between what a matriarch says and what a matriarch intends. Veronica Ronnie Bard arrived in that silence like a lighthouse and a question mark at once, present, familiar, the keeper of old stories and late-night tea, the person Monica had reached for in softer hours. But within days, the legal language that seemed so clear turned to fog. The will, on its face, left the mansion to the sister. The sister stood ready to accept. Yet anyone who knew Monica Quartermain's brand of love, stubborn, strategic, almost liturgical, could sense the riddle she'd left inside the ribbon. Monica never believed bricks and beams were merely property. The house was legacy, penance, leverage, and refuge all at once. She would not transfer that power casually, and certainly not to someone unprepared for its endless obligations. If the line was both correct and incomplete, there had to be a missing page, a codicil, a contingency, something no one had found or someone had buried. From the first reading, Tracy Quartermain kept her counsel but sharpened her instincts. Distrust, for Tracy, was not a failure of generosity but a survival skill honed over years of boardroom raids and breakfast betrayals. She did not dislike Ronnie so much as she disbelieved in miracles, and a sister suddenly inheriting the mansion read like scripture with a footnote torn out. Tracy walked the halls late at night testing the house's memory the way only a Quartermain can. Fingers on banisters rubbed smooth by generations, eyes resting on portraits that remembered every vote and every vow. In that ritual, she heard Monica's voice in the silences between sentences, and what it said was simple, "Look again." The first again led Tracy into probate filings and signature logs, the second into private bankers' back rooms where safe deposit boxes were opened with small apologies, the third into the long shadow of Martin Gray, a man who maintained that plausible grin only attorneys who practiced in Port Charles wear. Martin had shepherded iterations of the Quartermain estate plan across years, amendments drafted under duress, codicils etched in grief, trusts for the wayward or the luckless. He knew where the paper trail bent and where it snapped, and that made him either the best witness or the weakest link. Rumors traveled faster than subpoenas. Some insisted the will was genuine and that Monica, in a final gesture of grace, had chosen peace over precedent. Others whispered of sleight of hand, of a signature captured on a bad day, or of a clause swapped in a long afternoon appointment when no one was looking. Ronnie, for her part, stood in the eye of the storm with a steadiness that confused her critics and pained her defenders. She accepted condolences with humility, visited the mansion without staking a claim, and treated Monica's words like a blessing she wanted to deserve rather than a deed she meant to enforce. But even the gentlest beneficiary becomes a lightning rod when a legacy is in play. Invitations cooled, conversations sprouted barbs. Tracy kept her questions pointed and her tone civil, and still the distance widened. Every family dinner became a deposition. Every walk through the foyer felt like a procession toward a verdict no one could yet read aloud. The first real break came not from a confession but from the ink. Tracy's forensic accountant, a discreet, meticulous professional who understood that Port Charles is as much about chemistry as it is about character, flagged a peculiarity in the dating of signatures on an amendment attached to Monica's will. The notary block was pristine, the pen that signed Monica's name was not. The ink's age did not match the notarized date by a margin small enough to overlook but large enough to indict. That detail, coupled with a misnumbered page in a scan Martin's office had provided, created a seam Tracy could pull. She did so the way she always has, bluntly, with a steel thread of self-control. She set a meeting at Martin's office, chose a time he could not refuse, and arrived carrying nothing more threatening than certainty. What transpired in that room became a myth before the blinds stopped swaying. Tracy's voice, low and surgical, Martin's assurances, agile and unconvincing, the moment when professional posture gave way to personal poise and Tracy, in a flash of ancestral fury, drew a small pistol and stitched a warning through Martin's hand. It was not bravado but punctuation, the only mark she believed could stop a practiced liar from continuing a practiced lie. Blood on legal pads, a howl in a paneled corridor, a line finally crossed so that another could be restored. The fallout was immediate and strangely clarifying. Hospital staff catalogued an injury and a firearm, the PCPD catalogued statements, each one weaponized by subtext. Martin, righteous through the pain, vowed that he had done nothing but execute his client's will as written and that any irregularities were clerical. Tracy refused to apologize, a decision that infuriated some and secretly relieved others, because her bluntness blocked the family from drowning in euphemism. Ronnie visited Martin out of decency, not alliance, and left with a new dread. If she was truly named, why did it feel like theft? If she was only a placeholder for a vision Monica had refined in private, why had she been ushered into public jeopardy? It was then, between morphine and murmurs, that Martin slipped. He referred to an instruction letter no one had seen, a plain language note Monica had allegedly left to explain her heart even as her lawyers prepared her case. No such letter was in the probate file. No such letter had been filed with the bank. Either the letter never existed, or someone had a powerful reason to hide it. Tracy traced the omission the way a cartographer maps a coastline, patiently, acknowledging that every inlet has purpose. The notary who had stamped the contested amendment remembered the appointment too well. The day had been heavy with rain, the waiting room quiet, Monica's grief barely polite. Yet her memory of the signatures contradicted the scan Martin provided, page order reversed, a witness who never signed, a margin note in a hand that looked like Martin's quick block letters and not Monica's tidy script. A junior associate in Martin's office, already nervous that his name had been appended to so many high-stakes documents, cracked after a long evening with Tracy's questions and admitted what everyone suspected. A cleanup had taken place after Monica's last hospitalization, a rounding off of edges to ensure the estate reflected her spirit. In that phrase lay the arrogance that undoes careful men. No attorney is authorized to equate spirit with intent, not when the language says otherwise and the stakes are architectural. The instruction letter, when it finally surfaced, did what Monica always did at her best, it reconciled compassion with control. My dearest sister, it read in Monica's voice, steady, wry, unafraid, has a place in this home for as long as she wishes, and a room that shall remain hers should she ever need it. But the stewardship of this house belongs with one who understands what it demands. It went on to outline a trust for Ronnie's comfort, provisions to ensure she would never be humiliated by charity, and a clear directive that the deed to the mansion reside with Tracy, contingent upon a covenant to preserve the house's purpose as a family anchor. There it was, not exclusion, not indulgence, but order. The will Martin filed had converted the nuance of occupancy into the blunt force of ownership, replacing a permanent invitation with a transfer of title. Whether the error was cynical or reckless mattered less than the consequence. Monica had spoken, and her words had been blurred. Even in vindication, Tracy did not gloat. She had wanted the truth, not triumph, and the difference showed in the way she handled the fix. She called Ronnie to the mansion in the late afternoon, when light kisses the wainscoting and the place looks most like memory. She handed Ronnie a copy of the letter and let the silence do the explaining. Ronnie read, twice, and something unclenched in her shoulders. Relief has a way of looking like grief when it arrives on the heels of confusion. She had never wanted to be a usurper, only a sister given a place to rest. The two women walked the first floor together without speaking, arriving at a guest suite that had been Monica's refuge during renovations years ago. Tracy opened the door and then stepped aside. "It's yours if you want it," she said simply. Ronnie nodded and then, to Tracy's surprise, shook her head. "I'll always have a room here," she answered, eyes bright, "but I think it's time I choose a home that doesn't require a ghost to make sense." In that moment, the November departure wrote itself. Ronnie would leave not as a thief turned out but as a pilgrim who had finished a vigil. She packed slowly over the following weeks, offering gratitude without preamble, taking only what had been given to her by hand, a shawl, a bowl, a photograph that caught Monica mid-laugh. As for Martin, the hand he used to sign other people's futures healed with an impatient scar. Professional consequences arrived in careful envelopes and curt hearings. The bar does not look kindly on men who improve a widow's instructions to make the living more comfortable, and Port Charles, for all its moral elasticity, still maintains a fierce respect for the letter of a Quartermaine decree. Tracy refused to press criminal charges for the shot she'd fired. She considered the blood price paid, and besides, courts have a way of muddying what families must keep clean. Her concession did not absolve him. Censure is a slow blade, and Martin felt every inch of it. He issued statements about misunderstandings and good faith interpretations. The city listened, nodded, and remembered. In time he will draft wills again, because this town is practiced at forgetting what it cannot reconcile, but there will always be a pause when his name appears at the bottom of the page. The mansion, restored to its intended stewardship, resumed its old, unruly rhythm. Breakfast arguments returned to their rightful place under indifferent chandeliers. Traditions resumed with the odd new edge that follows any near miss with history. Tracy, whose victory had cost her a measure of sleep she may never regain, found herself doing the very thing Monica had asked, guarding the house's purpose more fiercely than its facade. She funded repairs no guest would notice, polished rules no cousin would thank her for, and kept a kind of ledger in her head of every person who crossed the threshold needing sanctuary. That ledger included Ronnie, whether she slept down the hall or across town. A room remained made up in pale light, fresh flowers on the dresser, the window a little open the way Monica liked, as if the house itself breathed better when it made space for someone particular. In the end, the scandal did not hollow the Quartermaines so much as it clarified them. The will said what it said, but the letter said what it meant, and between the two a family found its shape again. Ronnie left in November with a suitcase and a blessing, not an eviction notice, holding fast to the line that had started all this, my dearest sister, and understanding at last that Monica had not been bequeathing stone but preserving kinship. Tracy kept the keys without apology and carried the weight that comes with being chosen not for sentiment but for stamina. Martin discovered that some wounds throb loudest in the quiet after reputations are measured and found wanting. The house, meanwhile, watched them all with the patient arrogance peculiar to old estates, content that, for now, the right pair of hands turned its locks at night. And Port Charles, relieved to have a public answer for what was always a private question, moved on to its next crisis, grateful in its own sideways way that at least this time, the truth arrived before the wrecking ball.